Good evening, everybody. This is Mario speaking. I am the Media Relations Manager for Project Veritas. I'll be hosting tonight's Twitter Spaces to discuss our latest education video. Give it a few more minutes for people to join, and we'll get people started here. All right, we'll get started here in a second. Good evening, everybody. This is Mario speaking, Mario Balaban, the Media Relations Manager for Project Veritas. I'll be hosting tonight's Twitter Spaces to discuss our latest education story out of Georgia. Came out an hour ago. Seen a lot of you have watched it, so we encourage you to keep sharing it on all social media. We have a lot of speakers tonight that will be joining us. We have James O'Keefe, of course, Andy No. I see ALX is on already. So we'll obviously be giving the platform over to them shortly. Again, thank you guys for joining. We'll obviously see more people coming in here shortly. So James, please take it away.
Thanks, Mario. We just broke this massive story, bombshell story featuring a guy named Quentin Bostic, PhD, got his PhD from Georgia State, and he's admitting in this series of videotapes to violating Georgia state law. He says you don't say the word critical race theory, you can still teach it. So I want to thank you for joining here. I've got a number of people joining, big time influencers and journalists. So I've never done this before, so I'm kind of winging it here with this Twitter Space thing, and I'll just summarize the story first and open up to some other speakers. But this is a nonprofit organization with a $15 million budget, funded by some big people like Mackenzie Scott, the Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. And in this tape, this guy is bragging about being evil. He says while critical race theory is banned, you can still teach it if you don't call it critical race theory. He says the governor and the governor's wife would be angry if they found out what he's doing. He
Irrelevant B-roll. We're not doing
he talks about influencing children as young as kindergarten age. So we're on this beat, the secret curriculum we call it, because parents are being lied to, and we think that the public should know what's going on as it pertains to kindergartners. So he sells this curriculum, and makes money from the state of Georgia, and he is on tape violating Georgia state law. So we're looking for a comment from the president of the organization, a woman by the name of Sarah Johnson. I did speak to her on the phone. We're also looking for a comment from their board members. And this is a breaking story. It's already got, 140,000 views on Twitter just in the last hour, and it's breaking. So that's a summary. The content is king, and the stuff kind of speaks for itself. He calls himself evil salesman. Still banned in schools. I would get nailed if anyone found out, he says. So I just wanted to thank you all for being here, and kind of wanted to an open discussion with some of our guests here. I don't know if Mario, you have a particular person in mind to start with, who's on yet?
Yeah, we have both Andy on right now and ALX. Anyone who's ready to speak, please feel free to join.
I would go to Andy. No, Andy.
Yeah.
I noticed that you. Now, I actually spoke to Quentin myself yesterday, and I got his Twitter, but he took it down the moment that we found it. The people. Oh, by the way, it's very interesting. They always take their social media accounts down, which is wild. It feels like every single time we do one of these undercover investigations, they ban themselves on social media. But you found something out. I believe it was his Instagram page where he admits some things there, and now it's been taken down. But Andy, if you want to weigh in on that and anything else, your comment on this developing story.
Hi, James. Thanks so much for inviting me to be one of the speakers for this, and thank you to you and also your colleagues for another great investigative story. We see the final edited piece, and from the outside, maybe outsiders don't realize how much work goes into that. Me as a journalist, I look at this and I can see, wow, this is a lot of time. So thank you for this package that's been released as this breaking story. Some of the initial response thoughts that I have is that from coast to coast in the United States and in so many jurisdictions, state taxpayer money is being used to fund very radical projects and campaigns that the public doesn't have really any input in or knowledge about how radical they are. For example, there can be even some Antifa allied groups that I've seen in Portland and others who have received millions and millions of taxpayer money. In this case here, taxpayer money is spent to buy these curriculums that this Dr. Quinton Bostic writes, and as he plainly says in these recordings, that he circumvents the Georgia State Department of Education ban on K through 12 CRT material simply by just omitting those words. Chris Rufo and many, many other conservative grassroots activists and independent journalists have, for months, have been trying to inform the public about how CRT is taught in state schools without explicitly using that label. And of course, we are always gaslighted and told by people like those on MSNBC that CRT is only taught in legal academic settings, that is a right-wing conspiracy theory to say that it's being taught to children. Plainly, that's not true. You could see that, and it's nice now we can see it on video, at least for Atlanta. And I think what the public needs to understand about why CRT is so dangerous as an ideology is that it teaches explicitly racial grievances in the way that the paradigm that it explains what it views as injustices in the world places blame on certain racial groups. And to teach that to children, I think is, I'm in agreement with those who view it as abusive and a form of ideological political indoctrination. Those are my initial comments. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Andy. And one of the things that you uncovered, because you kind of have a knack for unearthing their comments they've made before they got caught. This is an Instagram post from Dr. Quentin Bostic. That's Dr. Quentin Bostic. He's tagged on Twitter. That's the same exact Instagram. Has he taken his Instagram down yet? I believe he has. We'll find out in a moment. He says, quote, this is a public statement that Quentin made. It's not on video, but it was on his Instagram. After Governor Kemp created this law, 11-2 vote, the Georgia Board of Education voted to oppose the teaching critical race theory. He said, quote, so I'm definitely not about to stop teaching CRT, and it's the foundation of my dissertation research. Now, what you gun do? That's what Quentin Bostic said. So he's said these things before. Andy, you found that screenshot, and we probably should tweet that out here.
Indeed, yeah. I'm actually going to post it now.
Okay, we'll retweet you, Andy. If you post that Instagram caption, it's a caption from June 7th, 2021. Let's go to some other people on the air here. Again, forgive me, I've never done this before. So
Yeah.
Mario, who else
no
do we
worries. I'm
have
here,
present?
James. We have ALX next. I think we should give the floor to ALX.
What are your thoughts on this breaking expose?
Another great drop as always. So my initial reactions are basically just how pervasive this is. They want you to think that these things don't exist, but then time and time again, we get these people in their own words telling exactly what their agenda is. And for the people that they say critical race theory doesn't exist, these people are using the word critical race theory and then saying we're going to teach it to kindergartners, and the way we're going to do it and subvert the law is by not calling it critical race theory. So by robbing it of its what it actually is, they're denying not only does it exist, that it's being taught, but that's exactly how they're going about getting it in these schools, is getting it snuck under the radar. So I think those are just my initial comments on how the actual strategy of these people that are trying to get it into schools is first denying its existence, and then two, just not calling it that, and flying under the radar and subverting the law. So I'd really like to see what comes out of this, and for somebody to admit basically that they're breaking the law, to see some accountability here, and hopefully it dissuades other people who might be doing it. And again, like I said, just when you think there's no one's doing this, and like the media is trying to make us believe that no one's doing this, there's just video after video of these people in their own words saying exactly what they're doing. And it's frankly like disturbing when you see like that they're going explicitly after like kindergartners. It's just disturbing.
Thank you. 1 second, we got an echo here.
I was just going to say, I'll chime in there. I think that ALX, hit the nail on the head with what he was saying about accountability. James, I don't know if you might want to just, for some of the audience that hasn't necessarily been following the secret curriculum, this is, we've been putting out quite a few of these education-related stories over the last few months that have resulted in some pretty big results and impacts. So I don't know if you just want to, give anybody a quick little update on where some of that stands.
Yeah, we did a story on, this is the series of tapes on education we've been doing. We believe that the children, not messing with children or taking advantage of children or abusing children, is something that's really above politics, especially kindergartners. Like Quentin Boston talks about kindergartens. We did a story in Greenwich, Connecticut, where the guy said we don't hire people over the age of 30. He was responsible for hiring all employees. This story, and that prompted an attorney general investigation in Connecticut. That's a Democratic leaning state, whereas this story is the governor's office is a Republican office. In New York City, we did a private school director touting sneaking her agenda into the classrooms, going after people for their skin color. This is a woman named Jennifer Norris. Remember her at Trinity School? She was fired. Chicago, the famous butt plug dean. Now, what's interesting is our undercover journalist was the same undercover journalist who did the so-called butt plug dean story as who did this story. So he's back-to-back rock star, Project Veritas, very talented journalist. So we're kind of on this beat on education, and or it's making a difference. ALX, you mentioned accountability. That's the number one thing I'm hearing from every sector of society right now is no one's held accountable for anything. And there's sort of a nihilism in politics, rightfully so. Nothing matters. No one's held accountable. It's this sort of existential nihilism, I call it. No one believes that anything matters anymore. But obviously, what Veritas does is catch them in their own words, and I think the ultimate accountability is them on tape, right? They're caught saying the thing, and people like when they're confronted. Hint, hint. So let me go back to who's there. Well, Mario, Eric Spracklin. Who else is here that we want to ask for their opinion on this tape?
So we're waiting on a couple people that we've requested. I can see Ian Miles Chung is on. If you'd like to hop on and speak a little bit.
I see Jim Paff. Are you there, Jim?
We also requested it to Jim.
Jim, can you hear me? All right, Jim. Let's see if Jim chimes in. And Ian Miles, are you on there?
Yep, a couple of you guys have the invite, so just join up as soon as you can, and we'll get you appointed a speaker.
Let's see who else is on, guys. We can go to Sarah Carter. Are you there?
So while we wait on this, a couple of people to hop on here as a speaker, I did have something I wanted to bring into the queue here for everybody, and to the point of the CRT being disguised as DEI. That's basically the crux of what is being discussed in this video. Teaching Lab is actually operating in about 24 states. My question is, how many different states do we have Quentin Bostic's operating in? How many people out there still exist, and what are they actually doing behind the scenes, and how many states actually prohibit CRT? So I think Quentin Bostic might have been this one person we exposed, but just how many of them are there, right? And I think Sarah Carter just joined as a speaker. So maybe, Sarah, if you want to chime in on that, that might be a good way to kick you in.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on. James and Project Veritas, another super expose and report that exposes what is happening in our country and particularly with our children. And I think what was so fascinating to me as a mom, and I'm going to come to you from a different perspective, not just as a journalist. I think the work here is stellar because it basically shows the American public what they don't know, what is happening inside the school systems. And I remember, in Virginia during the election for governor in Loudoun County, I had a lot of friends that had their kids in Loudoun County. And I don't know if everybody remembers this, but there were so many issues with CRT, with other issues with the school system. And that was really what propelled parents, whether they were Democrat or Republican, um, to stand up to the school system and to really start taking charge of their students and of their children. And this is what this does for me. When I saw this report, I'm thinking to myself, well, what's really going on in the school? Is her curriculum what they say it is? Do we need to spend more time investigating? And I think that puts the onus on the public as well, to when we see things like this, to say, well, wait a minute, maybe we need to do a little bit more digging and find out what's happening in our own school systems. And and I think that exposés like this do just that. And I have to say, and you've incredible work that you've done as well, in exposing what was happening for years now with groups. And but something like this, James, I think the reason it's so effective is because this does deal with our children. It deals with the fact that our children, they're driving a wedge, I really believe, between parents, just as was stated by this doctor that was exposed. It drove a wedge. Literally, they're trying to, between the parents and students, and between their children. And I think that something like this, I certainly hope that the governor of Georgia takes this seriously enough and a full investigation is launched, and people are exposed and this is shut down.
Yeah, my comment on that is I think that we're trying at Veritas to bring people together with our journalism. And this guy refers to himself as a, quote, evil salesman. Now, hint, hint, one of the more cinematic things you'll ever see in your life. People always say, what's next? I actually spoke to this guy myself, really. And that probably will release tomorrow or Thursday. It's really one of the most extraordinary conversations you'll ever see in your life, because the Orwellian doublethink was on full display, because he kept denying, language has no meaning. But he does say here that he wants to sneak the critical race theory into the classroom, including the kindergartners, by disguising it as something else. He says, quote, the goal is to get the kids to influence their parents to make the ideological shift too. So I think that we can all agree it's not a good idea to have this horrible influence on children. At least I hope we can. And that's what we're
It's a
trying to
vector.
focus on here.
It's a vector of pushing ideological change. And professors, the ones who teach DEI, CRT, all this stuff, they talk about it. They talk about using kids who are, ones who don't really fit in, and using them because they're very easy to manipulate. Very easy for them. It's very easy for them to find that they want to have a sense of belonging, right? So they get these kids, and then these kids become evangelists, and they push this message on their peers and on their parents. And then you look at TikTok, right? There's so many videos of people talking about getting their mom to accept their gender identity or whatever, right? And there are cases where, I mean, in a lot of cases, the parents simply don't accept it, or their siblings don't accept it, and that just leads to the destruction of families. The ones that don't accept this nonsense, and the ones that do, they become evangelists themselves. They're like, well, my child is trans, and I want for my child to live in a world where they feel accepted, and so they too become evangelists.
And while waiting for James to get up, I mean, the work that he's doing and Andy's doing. I know Sarah Carter's done a whole lot of this. Is really critical to help us figure out how to expose the real dangers that come with these efforts. And for me personally, I mean, the public policy should absolutely be, we need to teach kids academic stuff. We don't have to cast the net wide to all these other things that distract children from being able to get to where they need to go. And this lack of focus on academic pursuits is really problematic, especially when you look at what was going on in Virginia recently with certain honors certificates being held back. But anyway, what James is doing is just one of the most fantastic bits of journalism that's taking place out there. And I know that's not to say anything less of what Sarah and Andy and Alex do, but this is really key stuff, and I'm so glad to see what James is able to accomplish here.
If you don't mind, this is Sarah. I just want to chime in really quickly. I totally agree with you, Jim. I think that what James has been uncovering here is really just the tip of the iceberg. I believe this is happening and has happened much more frequently than we can ever imagine. And you're right. You go back, you look at what happened in Virginia just recently. Go back even a little bit further to what I mentioned in Loudoun County, and then the issue of parents. Actually, I remember the whole scandal and all of the reports coming out as parents being marked as domestic terrorists for like speaking out against the school boards. Let's not forget about that, and how some in the DOJ were reflecting on the parents that were standing up and saying, wait a minute, I want to see what my kids are learning. I want to know what's happening in my district with my tax dollars. And so it is not only meant to drive a wedge between the child and the parent, but this type of curriculum very much is political. When you think about it, it has a tendency to be very ideological, and it has that type of ideology is intent on shifting and changing the culture. I believe the American culture, and the ideology being much more Marxist, in my opinion, than anything else when you're dealing with issues of equity principles and all of those issues that are taught with CRT.
And Sarah, I was sorry, really quickly, Sarah, just to your point, I love what you just said there about the wedge here between the kids and the parents. There is a part on the video where Dr. Bostic says that the goal of driving CRT and DEI, well, DEI is the made up, hiding term that they're using here, but really
Right.
CRT is to, quote, get the kids to influence their parents to make the shift too. So now,
Right.
obviously, if they, not only do they want to drive this difference between and separate, the kid actually belongs to the community, not to the parents. Now you actually go a step further here, and you actually want the parents to join in the community, right? The community that they envision is the right community, right? The community of thought that they have. So if anyone wants to comment on that, that would be great.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying, right? This is about driving wedges. It's about, dividing families or turning them into evangelists, right? And the parents become evangelists because they want their kids to live in a world that seems fair and equitable or inclusive. I think that's the term they use, inclusive to their lifestyle, to their, this nonsense. And more so than that, I mean, I don't think, I mean, you don't even need to say that it's of your opinion, right, Sarah? Because like they openly state that, like this was what Black Lives Matter
Right.
stated on its own website, that its purpose was to dismantle Western civilization, to dismantle, the patriarchy or the kyriarchy or Western traditional values, because they consider that to be oppressive. They don't explain exactly how it's oppressive. They just say that it's inequitable and that through DEI or CRT, they're able to achieve this utopian vision, which, I mean, to any sane human being, you're going to look at it and think, that's dystopian. That is messed up. That is not civilization. And we're seeing the effects of it right now, where kids are being openly racist to each other, right? To white kids in particular, and to Asian kids, telling them that, you're oppressors. So we can do whatever it is we want. We can say whatever we want. and you can't fight back because that would be racist, because you are historical oppressors, and we're simply, reclaiming our humanity by being inhuman. And it's mind-boggling that this stuff is, it's sold in such a way that it seems like it's a good thing, right? A lot of people sign on with
Right.
it. A lot of corporations, they give money to these organizations, millions of dollars, possibly even more, to these organizations. And I'm not talking like George Soros, right? I mean, he knows what he's doing. I'm talking like regular corporations. Target will sponsor drag events or CRT events, and companies will have these seminars, and they'll hire these Ibram Kendi style people. It's like a whole cottage industry of these guys to teach workers, as well as their families, even in some cases, on how to accept this sort of new paradigm, this new ideology, if you will. It's insane.
Right. Well, thank you. This is James O'Keefe again here. Just want to point out that the video is going viral right now. There is a law in the state of Georgia that makes this unlawful, and I have we printed out the statute here, or the resolution of the State Board of Education. It was the Fulton County School Board meeting, HB 1084. An enactment legislation making this prohibited. I'm just going to read it out loud so you understand that this is what this guy is saying is unlawful. He says no federal grant shall be applied or federal funding accepted if such grant or funding requires or encourages teaching of concepts or implementation of the practices of critical race theory, or if such grant or funding requires or encourages training teachers in such concept or practices. This guy admits to us on this tape he's got private companies, he's selling this curriculum, and he says he's going to be, quote, nailed by the governor if anybody finds out. I also wanted to say another thing to all of you. We've got about 3,000 people. Again, this is the first time I've ever done this like this. So I just wanted to say that Project Veritas, someone commented on Twitter, how does Project Veritas get these people to say these things so openly? I mean, listen to this. It's almost like a Saturday Night Live sketch of what you might think they would say, as the proverbial fly on the wall. And here's what I have to say to that. It's a ton of work, money, and time for our investigative journalists to do this. I mean, they're out in the field for months. And, we're a nonprofit organization. We take no advertising money. Nobody controls us. Nobody tells us what to do. The media obviously doesn't operate that way. Brought to you by Pfizer. Brought to you by Pfizer. This isn't brought to you by any corporate interest that dictates our agenda. So we are a nonprofit organization, and we are run by donations. I just wanted to let you know, and the brave journalist who did that, who is unnamed, although you can hear his voice as he's recording, you can see the lips moving of this guy, Quentin. Another thing we do at Project Veritas is we don't report anonymous claims. You can see their face when they're making the claim. So I would just encourage you to donate, even if it's $10 or $100. If you appreciate this sort of journalism, we certainly don't put it behind a paywall, and we don't yet have subscribers. So I just wanted to say that we're a nonprofit organization. We have a lot of legal bills. People are trying to take us down, and we could use your donations. It's projectveritas.com, projectveritas.com/donate to help us continue this type of work. Eric and Mario, who else should we throw to here in the Twitter Spaces?
Okay, James. So we got a couple more people on. I know Viva just jumped in, and then I'm also working on, if you guys remember, our Hasbro whistleblower David Johnson.
Let's first go to Viva Frey. I'd like his legal perspective on this guy admitting to circumventing the law, which is a state board of education. And then we'll go to David Johnson, one of our whistleblowers from Hasbro. Viva, are you there?
Yeah, James, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Well, look, I just tuned in to listen now, so I don't know that I necessarily have any commentary on the actual content of this, other than to say you're doing the Lord's work in terms of actual journalism, and I came to learn and not necessarily to commentate. So I'm sitting here, I'm listening. It's amazing. I'm sharing it around on our locals community so people come in here and listen. But what's going on in Loudoun is nuts. The information comes out sure as sugar over time, and you learn that not only were bad things happening, people knew about the bad things that were happening, people tried to cover up the bad things that were happening, and then when the bad things that were happening that they tried to cover up came out, everyone tries to plead ignorance. But no, other than that, no commentary just yet.
Well, I would say one thing for you to process as you take a look at this video and evaluate the laws in Georgia is it's very rare that you get one of these PhD guys, doctor. This guy's a PhD. He's project manager of a large nonprofit with a $15 million budget, educator in Georgia. Is you very rarely get them on tape saying, "I am breaking the law." That's what this guy says. He says, I am an evil salesman and I'm doing this. And if the attorney general, governor found out, I would be, quote, nailed. It's very rare, Viva, that we get sort of people dead to rights like this. So the question now is, and I think the question, I'm speaking on behalf of thousands of people here, maybe even 1 million people, is what's going to happen to this guy? And I don't know, Viva, you do a pretty good job of getting into the weeds on prosecutorial discretion and the law. And is anything going to happen to this guy? This is a Republican administration in Georgia, but the county district attorney might have jurisdiction. That's Fulton County, Georgia, and the other county is Cobb County, Georgia. So it's just an open question there. It's a legal question because I think everyone craves accountability in this country.
Well, I'm going to do what bad lawyers do. I'm going to punt it because I don't have enough information to even offer an assessment yet. I'm going to listen. I'm going to look into it. But James, I want to flip the question on you. Set aside my Quebec attorney legal opinion on all this, which I have none except for what I already believe. My question to you is, how do you get the people in to do this? How do you get the people to sit down and open up and be honest in a setting where they think they're comfortable to release the dirty details?
Well, I'm speaking on behalf of my journalist team because they've given me that responsibility. I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but I'm actually sitting in the room. I'm on audio now only, but the journalist who did the story is actually smiling like a Cheshire cat right now. He's looking at me, giving me a little fist bump, but he's not going to say anything because he's still undercover in all different various contexts, and I don't want to compromise his likeness so that he can get more information. I think it's about building a rapport with people and getting them to being likable. I think it's about making it not about you when you're speaking to a subject. In other words, you're focusing on them and you're showing them that you're interested in them as a person. And in politics today, everyone's sort of like a narcissist. They talk about themselves a lot. I think in journalism, I think most journalists are probably narcissists. But our journalists are not. Our journalists don't have bylines. Our journalists don't see their faces. Our journalists are selfless. Our journalists spend many nights in hotel rooms all alone. They spend many months trying to corroborate the information. So I think there's a manual that we give out, a training manual, where you really have to focus on also looking all around you, being interested in people, looking for corruption all around you, keeping your wits about you. Many people think, oh, you meet all these people on a dating app. No, I mean, many of these people we meet like at a train station. One of these education subjects we met in an airport, in an airplane TSA line. So, some of South by Southwest, et cetera. So I think there's a lot to say, but I think the primary method is to express interest in other people and listen to what they have to say. And you'd be amazed at what people will tell you when you do that. I think I summarized it. My undercover journalist is giving me a thumbs up here, so I just speak on his behalf. And there's many other techniques, but that's the bottom line there. Why don't we go to, and Viva, I look forward to, I'll send you, I think Eric and Mario, we should tweet out screenshots of these laws in Georgia so that our audience can have them, and maybe tag Viva in the tweet so he's got a copy of that, even though he's a Quebec lawyer.
Absolutely.
I mean, hell, Viva, you're better than most American lawyers as far as I'm concerned. I don't have a lot of good experience with lawyers, so
I'm good with stuff. I think I said Loudon instead of Fulton, but the bottom line, I don't know the details of this yet.
Well, we'll give you the details. We'll post some screenshots of the Georgia board resolution, the Fulton County School Board meeting, because we're trying to understand it ourselves here. This is Bill 1084 as passed House and Senate. So we'll post all the stuff, email it to you. Okay, let's go to one of our whistleblowers. I'd love to hear a take from David Johnson. Are you there? David Johnson, are you there?
He's a speaker. I think he's muted now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
David
the
Johnson,
bottom
if you could
left.
unmute yourself. There's a little unmute button there.
Yeah, and for
Where it
those
says
that
mic is off.
that are unfamiliar with David, while he's getting his mic situated, he was our Hasbro insider. You know, back in July of 2021, he came forward from the toy manufacturer Hasbro. They had partnered with the Conscious Kids, and they were pushing critical race theory as an acceptable mindset amongst not only employees, but they were incorporating into their toys. And David was a packaging engineer there. And he came forward to us to really kind of expose all of that initially with the CRT going on with children's toys. So if you haven't seen that story yet, I encourage everybody to go. You can check it out on projectveritas.com. But if you just search, Hasbro, David Johnson, you'll see quite a bit of information.
It's kind of crazy, right? I mean, to think about, to even talk about the idea that they're pushing a political ideology through children's toys. I mean, if you told me that 15 years ago, I'd say you're crazy. But now it's happening. We have proof. And I feel like the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it because they're part of it, you know?
Well, the mainstream media is less exciting than Project Veritas, obviously, because it's more thrilling and exhilarating to see their faces and watch their behavior. Okay, Eric and Mario, who else? I want to.
Yeah. I was gonna say I think Scott Pressler just joined, and I think he's if you would like to speak a few words on this latest video, it'd be great. Scott's on. I don't know if Scott Pressler can hear us. He's
Did you
also
invite him?
muted. Yeah, he's as a speaker here. I think
okay.
he's also muted, as well as David is also muted. Okay, we'll wait on them to join here in a bit. So my question here for the audience, or for the people who are speakers, is I don't know how familiar you guys are with Georgia specifically, if this is an issue that's ongoing. I know, for example, that critical race theory has been debated frequently in the House and the Senate there in Georgia. Obviously, given the fact that critical race theory is banned in the state. Now that we know that Governor Kemp was mentioned by name, apparently his wife, according to Dr. Bostic, is involved in education, and he fears, quote, that he would get nailed if they found out. What does anyone, potentially know or think, that not only his employer teaching lab, but the government of Georgia can do to enforce its existing rules on critical race theory?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Okay.
I'm James and it's Jim Paff. Just glad to be here with you. I have to say that what is so amazing about what Project Veritas is able to do, and the brilliant methods that you've brought to bear to get to this information. I mean, it just helps parents and people that are really concerned to be able to know where the problems are. And your job is to be a journalist. I do the political thing often, but I just think it's really important that parents and concerned people, really take in the information you're bringing out, study it, and look at it closely. And they just need to take that information to the people who can do something about it. It's often elected officials, but it's just they're going to their schools and expressing concern. And the more you do that, really good things can happen. I think the important thing about what Project Veritas gets done is you just do the tools using some of the most fantastic journalistic methods available to be able to give people an understanding of what's really going on. We really just don't have enough of that in this country. And you're amongst the very few, maybe near almost, I mean, you and Andy I know does some amazing things too. But I think what you've been able to bring to bear here, people need to understand what's happening. So people in Georgia need to look very closely at this information, watch the video, listen and follow the things that you're putting out so that they can have the tools they need when they go and talk to people who could do something to change this.
Yeah, and Jim, send it to the governor's office. So he says he's going to be nailed by the governor. What does the governor think? Send it to the Attorney General, send it to the DA. There's 3,000 people on this call right now. What I would ask you, people say, well, there's 3,600 people on this call. So I would ask you guys, if you're listening to me, please email this video to the elected officials there, Fulton County DA, school board officials, the governor's office. Email the video and say, what are you doing with this information? Okay, by the way, our videos just crossed 250,000 views in about 90 minutes, which is really great. So good to be back on Twitter, by the way. This is our was our first video after I think it's our first bombshell after back on Twitter, because we got after the butt plug guy. That was afterwards. So I'm back
Butt plug
on,
guy.
but
Love
I
it.
call him the butt plug dean. The New York Magazine doesn't refer to him as butt plug. They refer to him as sex education guy, right? They call it sex education, which is really the problem in journalism
Yep.
and media these days, is that they
Double speak.
use hyperbole, they use obfuscation, they change the words. We all know they do this, but it's interesting to point out how they do it. They refuse to say the words butt plug. They said that I was attacking a sex education guy. First of all, I'm not in the attack business. I quote people. We quote people for a living. There's a difference between attacking someone and quoting them. Reporters quote people. Politicians attack people. So we quoted this guy, and he said that he gives out butt plugs to underage girls, and the New York Magazine reporter said that we were doing a story on a sex education. We don't do sex education stories at Project Veritas. That's not our beat. But if you're breaking the law, or you're sodomizing underage girls and things of that nature, then that's newsworthy. That's interesting to us. So the video is at 250,000 views, and I appreciate all of you for getting the message out. We have another about 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I
Mario, who's
just
next?
Tiffany, I think you're on. I was speaking with Tiffany earlier. She is the co-founder of Moms for Liberty. So Tiffany, if you just want to, share us your thoughts as a mother and as a founder of this group, what is it that you take from this, and of all this stuff that's happening, I guess, in the classrooms in America these days.
Yeah, we're incredibly thankful for Project Veritas for bringing this stuff to light and really getting it out into the mainstream, because a lot of you have said the mainstream media is ignoring this, but American parents on the ground are feeling it very directly. So we started this organization in 2021, January. I'm a mom of 4. I was a school board member. I saw this very directly in my district. And parents every day are dealing with this, where their children are there's a wedge being driven between the parent and the child. James Lindsay talks often about the fact that this is the building of the Red Guard in America. And we need to take it very, very seriously. They put a hook in the child's heart and lead their head where they want the head to go. And they cash in on the inherent empathy of children. So this gentleman talks about kindergarten. That should be shocking to everyone in America, that children are being divided in kindergarten, but we're feeling it and seeing it. This work, the CRT, by the fruits of what it shows in the family. We had a family in Williamson County, Tennessee, a biracial child who didn't want anyone to know that their dad was white, because white people were bad. And, we're coming off of Martin Luther King Day. This is not the future that American parents want for their children to be divided. So thank you for showing this and being so bold and brave. And we will do everything we can at Moms for Liberty to spread this information.
That's really what we would ask you to do. People say, how can I help? I mean, the number one thing you guys can do to help is spread this around, right? I mean, it's this guy. This is accountability. And people say, what matters anymore? I mean, having the guy on tape, and I'm just going to read these quotes again for those of you who've joined us. Some people are visual learners, some of them are audio learners. Quote, I would get nailed if anybody found out. That's how you get away with it. There's a subtle way of teaching in order to disguise this as not as CRT, but as DEI. If you change what you refer to it as, then you can do it. This is what this guy is saying. By the way, some of these stories are all, it's about the lying. Quote, I would say I'm a good salesman, but I'm also an evil salesman. If you don't say the words critical race theory, you can technically still do it. The Georgia state government has no clue what is in my curriculum. And I'm like, this is great. This is good. He smiles with a huge grin on his face. Governor Kemp is, I'm quoting him now, Governor Kemp is such an idiot. Like, his wife does a lot of stuff on education here in Georgia. I would get nailed if Governor Kemp's wife found out. Now, Governor Kemp's wife, for those of you who don't know, is a school educator. She's an educator. If they come and take my business license, I can keep consulting. The goal is to, quote, get the kids to influence their parents to make the ideological shift too. So there he says it. This is Dr. Bostic saying that the goal is for the kids to change their parents' views.
That's Mao, James. That's Mao. That's the building of the Red Guard. They used the children to convert the parents.
I don't disagree with that. It's one of the scarier things in my career to see the sort of, I don't know what to call it. It's almost irrationality that the substance of what you're doing changes if you change what words you use to refer to it. And this guy's definitely, we know he's got a dissertation in critical race theory. We also understand about Dr. Bostic that he's a deconstructionist. So he's an expert in deconstruction theory, and his dissertation was actually banned. So that's kind of evil. I always
It's
felt that the Orwellian doublethink was evil.
it's what Yuri Bezmenov would call language pollution. They take one word, and everybody knows what that word means, and they change the meaning of it. Or if a word is dirty, right, a word that everybody's aware of, like CRT, and they disguise it as something else. So suddenly, they try to gaslight you, right? If you say CRT is bad, this is CRT, they'll be like, no, this is DEI. You're being hysterical.
And Ian, that's a great point. You actually just brought up Yuri Bezmenov. I was speaking with James just yesterday about Yuri, the KGB defector. To your point there, Tiffany, as well. He also says in an interesting ways that a person like Dr. Quentin Bostic, he obviously comes off as he believes in this neo-Marxist ideology, right, where everything is relative, and he believes also that he potentially has this massive influence that he's going to be part of this new society, right, when it comes to fruition. The interesting thing is, as Yuri Bezmenov said, is the head of the Marxist movement, for example, at the time, the KGB, they kept lists of the communist allies that they had around the world that were helping them spread the revolution. But just at the point when the revolution was successful in that specific location, the KGB's first move in that new country was to get rid of every single communist ally there for the simple fact that they knew too much. They knew too much of the revolution. They did too much to do the Cultural Revolution, and they not only are they not necessary, they actually are a danger to the new society because they know too much and they're a risk to the powers that come into it. So it's
Which is really interesting, Mario. Mario and I had this conversation together on the phone when this tape came out, and again, you guys ain't seen nothing yet, because what we have coming out tomorrow, possibly Thursday, is what we have coming out is unbelievable. The conversation between me and this guy is truly unbelievable, because you'll see evil, what he means when he says, I'm an evil salesman. But, Mario, it's like, it's this whole idea that words don't have meaning.
Yeah.
And it's quite ironic we're talking about in the context of education. By the way, for those of you who don't follow Project Veritas litigation, the New York Times made this argument in the New York State Court of Appeals that words don't have meaning. The New York Times. So isn't it funny that our newspapers and our schools are telling us that words don't have meaning?
Yep.
Those are the last institutions you'd think would say that.
Yep.
Yeah.
It goes to show, James, just how far this cultural revolution that some of the people like Quentin Bostic have really pushed in our society. It's their willpower is truly incredible. And I see here that Emerald Robinson just joined. If you want to chime in a little bit, up to you. I see that you're on, but I think this is a very important discussion to have about our society as a whole, especially where education is really where it all starts. Why is our media corrupt? Why are different aspects of our society corrupt? Well, it starts in education, right? So it's really there that Project Veritas is focusing on now.
Well, it shows you how they played the long game, right? While no one was really paying attention. And if anything positive came out of COVID, it was that parents became aware. And while I've been listening in as I can, I'm getting my own kids ready for bed right now. But I've already had, some very influential people from Georgia ping me during this. I'd flagged it for them. And a couple people have already sent it to Burt Jones asking, what is going on? How can this be happening? So this report, as often your alls do, is already making an impact and a difference. And I think by tomorrow you will see some of the scrambling with Georgia officials, even though Brian Kemp is over at the World Economic Forum. He's having a hard time with that right now. He's getting a lot of pressure from constituents and personal friends for being there, and this will only add pressure. So I think you'll probably see a difference. But, it's not, as you've exposed with some of the other states, it's not just the public education system. There are people who have been flabbergasted to find out they're paying exorbitant amounts of money for what is supposed to be the top-notch school there, only for their kids to be indoctrinated. And I had a friend the other day just say, my daughter looked at me and said, "My body, my choice." And she's 13 years old, and she's at this very expensive, elite school. And her mom was just like, "Where on earth did you get that?" And so it's just, you have to be vigilant, and reports like yours is so important for parents.
Hey, Mario, if I could chime in here, and
Yeah.
if anyone wants to respond to this, Robinson or anyone, you mentioned Yuri Bezmenov, how to pronounce his last name?
Yuri Bezmenov.
Yuri Bezmenov. Was
Yuri
that the one that
Bezmenov,
said
yeah.
their useful idiots would be the ones killed in the communist?
Lenin said that. That was
Lenin.
a Lenin quote. Lenin
So
said
what
that.
do we think?
Yeah.
I mean, so much of our journalism, reason why I think people love our work is that it results in reactions from the institutions. And what do you think the reaction is going to be from this guy's network of bad actors to his admissions and his honesty?
I think they might disown him because
Disown him.
he said the quiet part out loud. Yeah, they'll unperson him, pretend that he's not one of them, that he's dishonest, he's a dishonest broker just trying to make a buck, right? And that they're the virtuous ones. I think they'll find a way to just simply, sweep him under the carpet. They'll pretend that he just doesn't represent them, that they only want, equitability and social justice. But, behind the scenes, he'll be consoling him, of course. These
Right.
people are two-faced. I've been on that side, right? And he has breached what he has done is a cardinal sin. He has told the world what they're doing, his secrets, right? Their secrets. They don't like that.
Well, look at this. And to your point, you're absolutely right. Because if you look at the other teacher we exposed a few years ago, Gabriel Geip from California, he was fired, right? That was the guy who said he had 180 days to turn his students into revolutionaries. He wanted to scare the F out of his students. He had pictures of Mao in his classroom, right?
And they allowed it, right?
They allowed it.
Until people found out about it, and
until
people started talking about it, and then
Project
they fired
Veritas.
him. And you know how hard it is to fire a teacher in California? It's insanely
Well,
hard. But he managed to do it.
Geip ended up getting $190,000 from Natomas school district. I think that's the other amazing thing. He actually got 3 times his yearly salary to go away quietly and to not fight it. So I just find that fascinating that these people can go right back into society, and who knows where he's at today. We should probably follow up.
Well, and what's amazing about the work your journalist has done, James, is he is showing how these people are so intent upon pushing their agenda that they're willing to subvert democratic institutions to get it done. I mean, it's such a rank and purposeful undermining of what every American knows they have a right of, and that is the security of their vote, to be able to say who's going to represent us and to do the things that they ask them to do. And these people are intent upon saying that doesn't matter to us. We're going to indoctrinate your kids. We're going to do what we want to do and accomplish it the way we want to. I think that's
the question is, in our society, do we want to live in that world? I think probably the vast majority of people don't. I still believe, like with Gabriel Geip, we saw Republicans and Democrat parents stand up, many of them not conservative, and just upset. This guy said he wanted to F-U-C-K with their children. That's what the guy said. He said, I wanted, to send them to Antifa rallies. But I think what Ian said about this guy saying Ian Miles Strong, do you, when you were part of this group of people, I mean, so he's saying the quiet part out loud. They're going to unperson him. They're going to disown him. But it's very rare that we get to see this on video, isn't it?
People disappear, right? I mean, they don't disappear like literally. They just drop out of the public eye, right? Because they're told to keep their heads down. They may keep their jobs. They may keep their social relationships, but they're not really allowed to speak up, because the instant they speak up, they're going to start leaning on them. Because I think what they realize is that people who have been canceled by the left have a predisposition to being, absorbed into the center or into the right. We see a lot of that, right? Like with me, for instance, when I was canceled, they tried to shut me up, right? They were like, Ian, this is a bad look. Just keep your head down, like essentially telling me that I would be professionally disbarred, like prevented from having any future work really anywhere if I didn't shut up, right? That was the plan. I was like, no, I'm not going to shut up, and you guys telling me to shut up is just making me want to speak out more, reach out more to the other side, and that caused them to like really cancel me. So I mean, I went full bore, right? I came out as a right winger, I suppose. But they don't want that to happen, so they'll try to shut him up, and they'll try to keep the peace with him. But at the same time, he'll always feel that threat that he could be seriously canceled, because the thing about these guys is they keep notes on each other, right? Like any simple infraction, you made a bad joke once, you did something sexist or whatever, they keep notes on you. So you tend not to want to step out of line because you know what they have on you. And just like he probably has dirt on them, so they don't want that getting out
It
either.
is it is an interesting tell though that he took down his Twitter account. He
Yep.
locked that up. It's always interesting to tell. That's the thing that's so outside of their actions. Like this guy's going to stand behind what he said. He's going to say, "Oh, I believe everything I said is right," all so forth and so on. And then they take down their Twitter account. We saw that with the
Yeah,
Bernie Sanders staffers that we
James,
exposed.
I know Andy wants to chime in here. I was actually talking with Andy about this story yesterday while Quentin was actively taking down his social media. So I know Andy, you want to chime in, and then we do have David Johnson in the chat. I believe his mic is good to go now. So Andy,
Yes, it
go ahead.
is.
Andy, go ahead, and then we'll follow up with David Johnson and get his take as the Hasbro CRT insider.
Thank you. This is Andy Ngo speaking. I have a response to a view that has been shared. I do not think that this individual will face any career, professional, social consequences for his exposure in this video. We see over and over, in fact, there's quite often what usually happens is that there's a rallying effect that happens when people on the left are exposed for their radicalism. They are not treated as pariahs. People come out in support. You can think of the egregious example of the teacher in California last year, Gabriel, who you just discussed a moment ago. There was a lot of support for him, despite him admitting on camera, basically psychologically abusing his students and radicalizing them into very militant political ideologies. When people in public positions get exposed for having alternate personalities online where they express, let's say, a desire for law enforcement to be killed or property to be set on fire at riots, these people face no censure. So I don't think that Quinton's peers and colleagues will disavow him at all. In fact, they're going to go on the offensive. You can expect that the narrative they're going to run with is that this investigation is a racist attack on a black man, on a black gay man, and that critical race theory and diversity ideology is about teaching people to better understand racism. That's how they gaslight us.
Yeah, no, that's, I hear that point for sure, Andy. And this is actually a great segue into David Johnson, because as I want to introduce him a little bit. Obviously, I want him to speak about what he did, which was very courageous. But he was a whistleblower who worked with Hasbro, and he saw this CRT training. And guess what? They were trying to influence toys that was going to 1, 2, 3-year-old children, because according to Conscious Kid, who was brought in by Hasbro to train them on CRT, even 2 to 3-year-olds can be racist. And
They're
in this,
already doing this with Dungeons and Dragons, right? Hasbro owns Dungeons and Dragons, and they're actually
right,
doing that right now. They're using their policies and forcing it on other companies that use their
there
rule
you go.
sets, if you will,
Yeah,
right?
and
And they're saying it has to be CRT related. You can't have players, poisoning their minds with like this based stuff. It has to be woke.
right,
Not
and
those words, obviously, but
no,
yeah.
of course. And the thing is, Quentin Bostic himself said that his curriculum is going to kindergartners. So what you're seeing here is not only that they have to indoctrinate people with their ideology, they believe that it has to happen early and very early, right? So with that being said, David, tell our audience here a little bit about who you are, what you did with Project Veritas, and why you did it. That would be wonderful.
Sure. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm not sure.
Yes,
This is
yes, we
working.
can hear you.
Awesome. So like was introduced, I am the Hasbro CRT whistleblower. At Hasbro, I was an engineer, and they wanted the engineer and marketing teams to push CRT through the product and the packaging, but they wanted us to do it discreetly. And the end goal of the entire thing was to awaken a critical race consciousness in children. And this is why they constantly go after children, is because they understand that the older generations are more resistant to this type of thing because they'll recognize it as a sort of Marxist philosophy, which it is at its core. But if they get to children young enough, then they can kind of teach them that, hey, this is just how we treat people of different races or ethnicities. And if you follow these instructions, then you'll be a good person. You'll be an ally. And they use this very deceptive language to kind of basically gaslight you into thinking that you're fighting for American values of equality and colorblindness when you're in fact doing the exact opposite, and you're perpetuating racial stereotypes and racial discrimination.
Yeah.
And I think Andy is correct that this person will not face any backlash, most likely from their own groups. Usually they do kind of rally around these types of people, and they see them kind of as like martyrs or victims, and then they'll come out and say, hey, if you oppose diversity, equity, and inclusion, or anti-racism, it's because you're a white supremacist, it's because you're a bigot, it's because you're a racist. But in actuality, it's the complete inverse. It's just a very clever manipulation of language.
You don't think he's going to face repercussions for telling us his methods, like how they're doing, because they're all doing it, right? They're all doing it, what he's doing, and I mean they don't want us to know that.
I don't think so. I've actually taken a few classes on how to become a DEI activist, and I have a book coming out about this exact thing. All of this information is in the open. It's just hidden behind clever language. Like, DEI is a Trojan horse for these ideas. So I don't think they'll be at all bothered that he spilled the beans on how they're doing it, because this information's out there. I think they will just say that he was targeted by some right-wing organization, and then they'll use that to just kind of discredit this entire investigation that Veritas has done.
And that's to that point, David. The reason why it's so important for our audience and for everyone listening to keep pushing the story and getting as much attention to it as possible, because they rely on people not seeing what obviously they don't want to be seen, right? So the more people see this and the more people demand answers, the more chance of an accountability that that everyone seeks exists, right? So that's very important. And I would, and I see here that we have Heather and Adam just joined. Would love to have them speak. Heather, by the way, is a wonderful person, a great friend of Project Veritas. So please, Heather or Adam, take the floor here.
Hey, thank you guys so much. Great. I'm great to see you on Twitter Spaces. I don't know if this is the first Project Veritas Twitter Space.
Yes, it is.
It is.
It is.
This is the
That's
first. This is the
so
first.
awesome.
First of many. If everybody's enjoying this, which we've been on for a little over an hour now, we hope to keep doing these.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely grateful you guys are back on Twitter and doing this. This is amazing. One thing that I thought of when you were doing this, right? Somebody had brought up another point where some of these teachers that you guys out, right? Like, they may get fired, but who's to say they don't start working for another district in another place? You know what I mean? Almost sort of rebuild. You guys should really create like this Project Veritas website where parents all over the country can go and like plug in their teachers' names. And if there's an outing or a previous Project Veritas story, it can sort of like kind of run almost like a Project Veritas background check on them to see if they've been outed before. But this is some great stuff that you guys are breaking, specifically when it comes to Georgia. I've spent a lot of time there. I'm not 100% convinced that Governor Kemp, even if everyone reached out, would actually do anything about this. This one teacher may lose their job, but a story that I remembered from about a year ago, there was actually a principal in Georgia of a principal of an elementary school that segregated all of the Black children. And the reason this was brought to the forefront of the news was because there was actually a Black mother whose daughter basically like her husband worked for the school district, and so they sort of have this ability to pick what teachers their children can go to. And so when this black mother went to the black principal and said, I really like this teacher for my daughter, the principal responded with, well, that's not one of the black classes. And the mother actually filed a federal complaint against the principal. But there's this like very real threat going on when it comes to what these institutions are pushing onto our children. And I'm so grateful that Project Veritas has really launched this initiative to target what's within the schools. I mean, this is something that I think prior to COVID, a lot of parents didn't really pay much attention to. And it was only because of all that remote schooling that took place that people were really able to see what was going on in their child's classroom. And now parents are sort of picking up with their responsibility of policing these institutions, because that's what we as parents, it's our job and our job alone to police these institutions. And thank you to the wonderful work of Project Veritas, we're starting to have eyes on the inside now, by way of our children. But I will just end with one more point. Anybody watching a story that I'm working on with a parent here in my local community, there's actually this thing called the Sora app, Sora, that is on a lot of these Chromebooks and these remote platforms that our students can log into. The Sora app is sort of like this online library, but there's a lot of books in there that should not be in there. So while we're on this whole topic of education, I would encourage anybody listening to check their children's online login if they're in schools and see if they have access to this app. It's called the Sora app, because there's a lot of bad content on there that is making its way into our children's minds.
But
Question about the app. Is there a way to see which books they've read that they've checked out?
That's a great question. I'm not 100% sure. I'm actually meeting with the woman who's been leading the investigation into this. She's in my local state. I'm up in New Hampshire, so I can't really speak for other states if it even exists, but it's something that she's been really digging into. And I mean, there's some really inappropriate content through this Sora app. And in the town, like right near where I live, like these kids, high school, elementary, middle school, can go on, and it's like this digital portal that brings them to an online library. But in that library is all kinds of content that seems to be unregulated. And so you have no idea what kind of books your kids have access to, like through their school, right? So it's not even like if your child comes home and you have, you don't even let them use the internet, you don't let them have a phone, you don't let them have social media or whatever. Well, if you're sending your kid to school and they have access to the Sora app, they're getting access to a lot of stuff that parents probably don't realize is in there.
I
Yeah,
have to tell you, this is why what Project Veritas has put out today is so critical, because parents, they're groping for ways to figure out how to expose, or at least to know what these education institutions are doing. I mean, these people are subversive Marxists that are coming in to try to undermine families. And if you don't, you need this kind of investigative research like you're doing,
Mhm.
Heather, like James is doing and his team, because parents are they're just looking for tools and ideas and ways to stop this stuff.
Amen. And I think in addition to Marxists, like we're talking, some of these people are straight up pedophiles and groomers. Like, let's call them what they are, because they're pushing some stuff on children that 50 years ago never would have been socially acceptable.
Oh, you're talking about the butt plug guy?
Oh, that guy. Yeah. Oh, God. I couldn't even watch that video. Like, as a parent, like, I have a daughter myself. So, like, when I watch some of this stuff that's going on with our schools, like, it's just sort of like, it gets my blood boiling. And, but
yeah.
not just that,
I think
Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, right? Do you guys remember when he found out within his state they had pictures of like basically gay sex in books, like not even like censored. I mean, it had like gay sex in children's books in the schools right under his control. And he, let loose to the media and was just like, this is disgusting. This is awful. And of course, the media tried to assassinate him. But yeah, the butt plug story was pretty bad.
Yeah, one thing, Heather, I know that you mentioned that I thought was very keen, and I love the idea of this Project Veritas kind of website that
Background
kind of
check.
tracks these teachers. That's that might be a project we have to work on in the future. But one of the stories that we released during the Secret Curriculum series actually was a follow-up to Libs of TikTok. There was a teacher in Oklahoma, Tyler Wren. You guys might remember him. He was an anarchist middle school teacher. He's saying he wanted to burn the system down and F the parents and all this stuff. He actually was at a school in Oklahoma, quietly left that school after Libs of TikTok originally exposed his radical TikTok. He ended up going to Tulsa, basically 10 miles down the road, got another job, said that basically the school didn't care too much. Nothing was going to happen as a result of him, leaving his previous school. We then caught up with him. He doubled down on a lot of the statements that he was making and said that actually House Bill 1775 in Oklahoma, he could actually lose his teaching license. So what we've seen in the wake of that release, the Secretary of Education there, Ryan Walters, he's actually called recently for his teaching license to be revoked, and hopefully we'll get some follow up on that soon. But to your point, Heather, about these teachers, these radical teachers, just packing up, going to another school as if nothing happened. That's a very real thing that's happening. There's got to be more examples out there, and that's what Project Veritas wants to do. We want to keep exposing them because they're everywhere. So I know Adam's been wanting to speak for a little while. Adam, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I think one of the things that needs to be discussed is like the actual law that's in Georgia, right? So Georgia probably has one of the most robust anti-CRT laws, but the problem that comes with that is that you actually end up enshrining the way around the law, right? By being so explicit, you actually create these loopholes. And this individual, Dr. Quentin Bostic, works for what appears to be a consulting company, and you just look at their website, right? And they have all sorts of interesting euphemisms for various CRT things. And this is part of the problem with these kinds of laws is like the lack of enforcement, right? So this company may or may not be banned from selling to the state of Georgia at some point, but it still stands to look at this as like this is a problem that's across the board, that's very broad. And I think that's a bigger question of like this recent video and the subsequent videos, knowing Project Veritas tends to come out with these things in like a drip. Like, how ubiquitous is this in the state of Georgia? Because everybody I know who's like involved in politics in Georgia constantly tell me that this is actually a very broad, very common problem, is the avoidance of the law using other terms like social emotional learning and all the rest of it. Because like really the power and the solution still rests with the legislature and the SBOE, the State Board of Education, not even the school boards at this point. Sorry, go to Veritas, people.
So we got some breaking news. Maybe if somebody out there can double check this. It looks like the teaching lab has removed Quentin Bostic from their website. So any of you guys that are out there want to double check that, but
I'm on their
that's
website.
what we're seeing right now.
I'm on their website, and it's actually very hard to actually find anything on it. They're taking down pages all throughout their website.
That's we're getting a lot of that. So expect more to continue coming out on this.
No, and we were just discussing this now. Like there was, and I think it's a very legitimate argument about accountability. Will this person be held accountable? Will something happen to this individual? Right. So, if this is in fact confirmed that he was removed from the website, does this mean that they're just going to Andy's point, hide what his work at Teaching Lab, or they're actually moving to hold him accountable and potentially remove him from his job, right? So that would be very interesting to find out.
Well, I mean, it's an outside company, right? It's a consulting shop. So, like, it's the whole shop, right? He has liability.
So it's billed as a nonprofit organization whose mission is to fundamentally shift the paradigm of teacher professional learning for educational, and the magic word, equity. So we already have that word equity in there. It's a red flag immediately that there's some potential ideological motives for the organization. It is billed as a nonprofit, though. And again, it's operating in 24 states. And it's funded by people like Mackenzie Scott, who is Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. So there's a lot of money. It does have apparently a lot of reach. The question is, again, what is Teaching Lab's exact intentions with this individual now that allegedly he was removed from the website? And further, how many other Quentin Bostics exist within Teaching Lab? That's the question that not only a rhetorical one for everyone here, but something that Project Veritas probably will be looking into.
My guess is that they'll start hiding all the people who work for them. That's what some of these organizations do, right? Because they realize that organizations like Project Veritas come after them. So they just hide their employees.
Well, and in fact, you saw this in with Vanderbilt University doing a lot of this, sexually altering stuff when Matt Walsh revealed it. I mean, these people, they put it out in plain sight because they think they're getting by with it. But then when you expose them, they start to put it down, which is why it's great having Project Veritas there, because they'll go down and dig deeper and find the rest of it. Like this is a real assault on our culture and on our democratic institutions that cannot be let go. And that this is tools that parents can take and go straight to the Board of Education, straight to your school board, straight to Governor Kemp and say, we're not going to put up with it anymore.
Absolutely. Hey, Eric and Mario, I just kind of curious with this news story that you guys broke, is it like, because I'm not familiar with the laws regarding the education in Georgia. I'm more of like the election integrity person. But like, as far as what he did, if there's a ban on what he was pushing in these schools, then shouldn't he be held ultimately criminally liable if there's like an actual law that prohibits what he did? Like, because I feel like if that's the case, then being fired isn't enough, and we as the public and as the parent should really make sure that he is brought to justice to the full extent of the law.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. We're unsure if there's criminal liability in this. It's more likely that it's going to be like a licensure or some sort of other civil injunction, that he would get in trouble for. Not necessarily, that we're going to see him in prison over this in Georgia, but what the legislature can do, with this new law, will be very interesting. We hope to hear from them. If there's an investigation that's opened as a result of this story, that's the type of stuff and the impact that we're always looking to make.
Right. Well, the thing that they would do is they would ban this Teaching Labs from doing business in the state of Georgia, right, with the Board of Education. This is why the Board of Education is so important. A lot of these like policy violations are not criminally or even civilly enforceable, right? So like you make these decisions by fiat. So you have to be able to just remove them from the process by which that they were hired for or consulted for in the first place. And that's why there's so many complaints about these laws, whether Texas, Georgia, Florida, et cetera. Is that basically they're toothless as long as no one's actually finding out what they're actually doing day to day, week to week, right? And that's why it's so important for people to just be constantly asking the questions, to be exposing it. Groups like Project Veritas doing the deep undercover kind of work.
And here's an interesting question I think I want to pose that connects the education to the political angle of all this. For a long time ago, and when I say a long time, it could be even as early as 5 years ago or more, before the 2020 election, I always myself found Georgia to be a red state, right? And clearly in the last two election cycles, that's not been exactly the case. So, Republicans in Georgia are probably asking, how come did Georgia go from a secure red state to a potentially purple state today? What do you guys think about the argument that people like Quentin Bostic are playing a major role in that situation?
Well, wait. Let me weigh in on this only because, like, the better part of the last 2 years of my life has been digging into the Georgia 2020 election fraud. And I can tell you that Georgia is still a red state. Like, it never went blue, it never went purple. There is so much crime and corruption in Georgia, and it's absolutely disgusting, whether it's the voting machines, the ballot harvesting, like, there's so many issues. Georgia has been red since 1992. It never flipped blue. And like, ultimately what happened in Fulton County, DeKalb County, and a few other things, it was a hostile takeover. Now, I do believe that, when it comes to the overall mindset of people, there really is a cultural shift when it comes to this CRT stuff, but that's not really, I don't think any one person can take credit for it. I think it's a combination of, like, think of who's headquartered in Fulton County, CNN. Their headquarters for the entire country and all of their operations is headquartered right there in Fulton County, in Atlanta, right? So there's so much propaganda being pushed on the people of Georgia, and to think that the only way they could actually win those elections was by cheating really shows you that the overall mindset of people in Georgia is actually on our side. Like, we have the majority. The majority of parents don't want this stuff in their schools. There's a reason, right, that there's so much pushback for these things, despite all the propaganda and stuff being put out. But I just do want to make that point that Georgia, there's no doubt in my mind that Georgia is red right now.
Interesting take. I would say, I would ask, when you bring up CNN, that's a great point. CNN is not only the national headquarters. CNN is a global. It's the largest media company globally, right? So their global headquarters is actually in Atlanta. But it goes back to my original point a few 30 minutes ago, where our education system really is getting these reporters educated, right? It's our journalism schools, but clearly from what Quentin Bostic is saying, it's not, it's too late when you're just indoctrinating, people in the universities or even high school. He's talking about selling CRT curriculum to kindergartners. I think, and from my studying of these issues, that it's been a more recent push to really indoctrinate kids that young. I don't think they were doing this nearly as openly 10, 20 years ago. But clearly, when you say that organizations like CNN or other media companies that have their journalists, purveying this propaganda and this information out there today, how do they get there? And wouldn't you argue that people like Quentin Bostic promoting his curriculum in schools got to influence these soon-to-be journalists that we have, in our system today, and probably in our future too now?
So Sonny Perdue was elected in 2002, and before that, like as Heather was saying, that it was pretty deep blue before that point. So and we got to remember, Brian Kemp's the first governor of Georgia as a Republican who wasn't a Democrat before. This is a lot closer state than people give it credit for, and this is why all the contesting the chairmanship of the Republican Party is important. Why doing all this activism is important. All this investigative journalism is important, because some of our stronghold states that we have taken, we haven't taken as seriously in the past, are closer than they have appeared, especially after the COVID-19 lockdowns and everybody moving to these freer states. You have a lot of people coming in there bringing their Democrat voting patterns. And so this is why this stuff is very important. You see the same thing with Texas as well. Like, it's not as red as people think it might be. I don't think it's going to be turning blue anytime soon, but the Democrats have the ability to actually win the majority of the seats in Texas, for example, for the State Board of Education. They've done it before, even with a red sweep across all the statewide elections. So we have to be very serious about this stuff and making sure that we're enforcing our values through legislation and also following up on these things, because the Democrats are deeply entrenched in a lot of these areas, especially some of these more agricultural states, with also these growing major metropolitan areas, because you still have some Democrat farming communities, like especially in places like Minnesota, but you also have the major urban centers where they are basically deep, deep, deep blue, especially like Atlanta. It's not as red as people want to think it is, but Kemp is such a good campaigner. Like even with Trump against him, even with all these other things that were going against him, he was able to crush it in this past election. Talk about the politics of it, but still, it's a state with a weak executive branch. It's a southern state, and there's a lot of things that have to be enforced at the more local level. We have to be activists for our own cause.
And keep in mind, you got to take, the small seats, the local seats, the school boards, because that's where the Democrats, the left, right, the progressives, really not even necessarily Democrats, but the progressives, the woke left, they're targeting those school boards, and they have a lot of financing. They get the financing from activist organizations, much larger ones like the Sunshine Movement or George Soros. They're directly financing the campaigns for these school board positions, and that's where you got to watch out for. And so it's important for conservatives to do the same, right? We need to do the same. We need to actually take those school boards and ensure that when we have one of our people running for office, a small local office, they need to win.
So I'll just jump in here. To the point, I think it was Adam that brought up that they're going to start hiding their employees. We're actually witnessing that happen live. So not only has Quentin Bostic been removed from the Teaching Lab website, their entire staff roster is currently no longer on the website. I believe that there was about 60 individuals, 50 or 60 individuals that were previously listed on there. We've got screenshots of that type of stuff that we can share with everybody, but they are actively hiding. I think that that point was very, very well taken. I don't know if you want to expand on that, but I know James Lindsay is also in here. He hasn't had a chance to chime in yet. James, if you have any thoughts, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks. I'm going to go a little tangential from the kind of Georgia politics, but I mean, I'll touch on it. I really want to thank, of course, Veritas for exposing this. Part of my life has been being considered crazy for saying this is happening for 5 years. So evidence is just so important to get out there. So I'm very grateful for that. I want to kind of circle back, since Tiffany earlier invoked that I study Maoism. I don't want that to be lost like it's just some kind of a lore. Oh no, Maoism, that's bad. No, it's an active strategy, and it's very important to understand the reason they're pushing critical race theory so vigorously on kindergartners and first graders and children. The reason we have this evil salesman pushing it so vigorously, changing the language to get around the law, is because it does a few things. It creates an activist base so that the kind of thing that we saw happen in 2020, which is the kinetic portion of a cultural revolution, can take place if it needs to under the right conditions. We understand that allies, activists, etc. The whole point of education under social emotional learning that's bringing this stuff in is to create an activist base instead of educating. But it also sets up a situation that kind of circles back to our butt plug story, which is that the CRT makes people feel bad about their racial identity, and they're given an out by being able to adopt queer identities, which they're also being taught about, and they're given the opportunity to join gay straight alliances, or now they call them gender sexuality alliances, where they'll be love bombed if they adopt a queer identity, which is a political identity, not a sexual identity. And this is exactly, and it's very, very important to understand, this is exactly what Mao Zedong did in the Cultural Revolution with children, with the intention of getting them to convert their parents. He didn't use race and sex and sexuality. He used various Marxist economic statuses, but he created 10 different identity categories, and he bullied certain kids and had the schools bully certain kids along certain lines, whether you were rich parents or you had, they were landholders or they were landlords, even worse, if they were counter-revolutionaries or right-wingers specifically was listed. And he would have those kids bullied and give them worse treatment. And then if you were a revolutionary, they gave you really good treatment. So they funneled the kids into these activist programs to get them to take up the red guardship. And then they would send them to attack other teachers, their parents, their grandparents, to drag them out into the street and humiliate them. All the kind of struggle session stuff that we see coming from this, that these kids are being subjected to. When we have parents and we have teachers and we have activists around the country searching for answers, what's happening, What's happening is a Maoist style cultural revolution that's purposed, it's well financed. I said in the schools that they're using social emotional learning. If you want to know the tricks where they're changing language and how they do it, I wrote a book called Marxification of Education this year. You should check it out. It kind of unmasks how that works, but legally speaking, there's things like ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act passed in 2015, that mandates them to bring in something that does non-academic competency into the schools and to report back on it. And then these consultant groups go around and sell this, whether it's CRT, culturally relevant pedagogy, SEL, CASEL, transformative SEL, whatever happens to be, queer theory. They go and they sell this to the schools as a means of satisfying that requirement from the federal government. So we need to be leaning on our lawmakers, and I've spoken to a number of them, 20 or 30 of them. They've never heard of the ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, passed in 2015. It needs to be repealed. It absolutely needs to be repealed or at least amended, remove this requirement. We're not going to get back to education for basics. It's going to be education for activism until they remove the non-academic competencies. And unfortunately, our governors, our National Governors Association, our governors' wives don't know their assholes from their elbows, and they're all pushing youth mental health and this crap right now, where this is all going to come in even more deeply under the radar, no matter how red a state is. So those are some comments, but this is a Maoist insurgency against the United States, and we have to treat it as such.
Well,
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
no,
think
I
that
think that
that's
that's
absolutely great. A great point that you make. And Bostic says it himself. I mean, he calls himself an evil salesman. He comes in, sells this curriculum to the districts, and the result is that he says it himself. The government is not aware of it. Kemp is not aware that he's doing this stuff. These school boards don't know what they're buying. So yeah, I absolutely agree that. Um, there's this evil salesman plan to make this all happen.
And James, I always love speaking to people who have an in-depth knowledge of communism, and so that's something that I've spent. It looks like you've spent more time than I have. I've spent many years understanding this, and speaking, and trying to understand exactly how are they so successful, right? And one example I want to put out there for people to discuss is exactly the butt plug example from Chicago, because not only did the media label it as we were exposing and going after sex education to make it seem like Project Veritas was the bad guy for hurting the education of these students that they so much need, and they didn't ring up butt plugs. The crazy thing is, and this happened to libs of TikTok too, then they say that we are actually putting these teachers in danger by exposing them. So they start alleging so and so bomb threat has occurred. And
Stochastic terrorism is a new
right?
term they use.
Can you remember
Exactly.
like a time when pedophiles and groomers, like they should feel like they're constantly in danger? Like we as parents should make it so that nobody has the balls to freaking come out and talk to our children like this. Like
Well,
where
but
does it go
here's the thing,
wrong?
Heather. The thing is that they tried, in our case, they tried to say that there was a bomb threat that was placed on the school, putting the kids in danger, and that was a result of Project Veritas exposing the school. So they change everything, no matter how you know uh, good our intentions were to protect the children, right? In this case, from being exposed to butt plugs as underage kids, right? But it actually transforms into us going after sex education. And then after doing that, we found some crazies in Chicago who are willing to go and bomb the school on our behalf, right? So it's that
Can I
kind of
can I just ask
ability.
a question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, just speaking to Heather's, mama bear instincts shared right now. At what point do we stop reasoning with them and we tell them enough? Enough coming into our home, invading our parental rights. Enough. We need to fight back and stop defending something that is our fundamental right as a parent. I do not co-parent with the government. Enough.
Yeah.
Do that. I mean, the fact is that they are shoving out real academic work from the schools and replacing it with indoctrination. I mean, that's literally what's happening here. These outrageous Maoist little dictators on many school boards, involved in other ways in professional academic areas. They don't, we're not even allowing our kids to be able to get the basic critical thinking just to understand the validity of a logical statement. I mean, it's just a basic thing. They don't even know what the law of contradiction means. That if something is, that something can't be something and not something at the same time in the same relationship. So therefore, you cannot know whether a male is a male or a female is a female. You get into this butt plug stuff and think that that's appropriate discussion in a school when that's left to parents. I mean, this is the thing. They're shoving out academic work, replacing it with stuff that leads to indoctrination or a dumbing down of things to lead to some cultural result that will lead to political results that they hope to achieve. And parents need to stand up and say, Tiffany, you're exactly right. We're done. We're not having it anymore. You're getting rid of all this stuff. We're going to zero and neutral. We're not going to some place that you want to go on sex education. We need to extract it from our education curriculum. We'll handle it as parents, and then let's go teach our children how to think again.
Yeah, let me respond to that. I think that there's so many people out there, like if you're not already following Project Veritas, then there's probably so many parents out there that still have no idea that this stuff is going on in their child's school, right? Like you put your kid on the bus in the morning and you send them off to school, you think they're going to be learning math, English, social studies, science, or whatever. You don't realize that this perversion has really crept into the education institution, and it's thanks to groups like Project Veritas that if you're like seriously keep retweeting this, and if it like do some homework as a parent, right? If there's 5 parents that you're connected with, ask them if they followed Project Veritas, and if they're not, get them plugged in, because sometimes the solution to pollution is dilution, right? Like we need to start waking up more parents, and we can't use the ignorance card anymore. We can't say we don't know that this isn't going on in our school systems, and we have to be the ones to sit down and talk with our children, right? This sounds foreign because they've really, tried to separate the family unit here, but sit your children down and have a real conversation with them and be like, what is going on in your classroom? What are your teachers teaching you? And be the parent. I think, we've gotten so far separated of what real parenting looks like these days, right? Because the left is constantly trying to push women to be full-time career business women, and sort of separating that maternal instinct that we have to our children to actually raise and bear children. And they're trying to separate it, right? But talk to your kids, because the number one thing that is going to destroy this in its tracks is parents that are involved with their kids' life. It doesn't matter what's going on at work, what's going on at the news. Be involved in your kid's life and know who you're sending them to for 6 to 8 hours per day, right? I mean, I just like, it's the mom in me coming out is like, this is how we're going to destroy this crap.
We
That's
can't let this be normalized. I think that's the most important thing here. I mean, I think everyone in this room knows that this stuff happens in colleges, and that's normal, right? It's become normal. It wasn't normal 50 years ago, but it's normal now. You go to college, there's a good chance you're going to become a blue-haired freak, right? That's just the reality of it. And it's not just the United States. It's in Europe. It's in South America. There's a big meme account in Brazil that actually makes fun of this. They show before and after photos of college in Brazil. Same thing is happening there, and but that's college, right? That's something we can find a workaround. Maybe, I don't know. That's a harder question. That's a different topic, right? But we can't let this become normal in high schools, in middle schools, in grade schools, in kindergartens. This is
right.
something that parents have direct control over, right? In college, it's like, okay, the kid's 18, he or she can do what they want, right? But this is something that you have direct control over thanks to existing legislation that gives you that power to have control over a minor. And that is something they are also trying to erode, by the way.
Yeah.
They're trying to make it so that you can't have those rights with your
And
kids.
and to
Can I
that
ask a
point,
question about something about intellectual freedom?
sure.
So I've heard the argument made by librarians when they fight against all these books in the libraries, like it's academic freedom, intellectual freedom. And I understand at the college level that exists and it's important. But in the K through 12 space, I would just like anyone who has an opinion to weigh in about what, like, it's a government school, the teachers are government actors. What intellectual and academic freedom exists in public schools?
Well, it's funny because like they use the exact same argument of saying certain things can't be taught because they are bound and restricted by curriculum, right? There really isn't supposed to be academic freedom through K through 12, right? It's supposed to be like, you're trying to learn the basics so that you can graduate and become some sort of functioning human being. And I think that's one of the things that's like a bad argument. And I think that should be just pointed out constantly. Like people, you don't have, as a child, you don't have freedom to do things. And that's why this indoctrination that we are experiencing is so bad because these kids are being subjected to this woke indoctrination, and it's a bad argument for them to indoctrinate the kid